Andrew Yang has a new book called The Last Election, which claims when voters go to the polls next year, 2024, it will be the last election. Fortunately, it's fiction. But does he know something we don't know? Now, first of all, I have to explain that in the introduction, I said that you were a maverick who wants to move forward. We need to explain that in your book, you have a third party called Maverick, and you have founded a third party called Forward. And Forward wants to take partisanship out of politics. Is that a pipe dream?
Well, we're having success around the country, Marcia. We've already enlisted dozens of mayors, state legislators, city commissioners who want to put down the blue versus red and just deliver for their constituents, which, by the way, is exactly what their constituents want. So Forward Party is already the third biggest party in the country by resources. Now, there's a very steep drop-off between 2 and 3, but we're growing quickly. We're making headway because so many Americans feel so stuck and they want something better.
So are you picking up support from independents, or is it just people in both parties that are tired of the partisanship they see in Washington?
It's all of the above. 49% of Americans now say we're independents, and then you have a lot of ticked off Democrats and Republicans joining all the time.
But are the people who are joining the Forward Party mostly local elected officials as opposed to the national leadership, which seems hell-bent on still being partisan?
It is mostly local officials. We do have the former lieutenant governor of Massachusetts, Carrie Healy, who just joined, Chris Novoselic of the rock band Nirvana. I consider them both national figures. Chrissy Todd Whitman of New Jersey is my co-chair. But in terms of officials who are signing up, it's mainly at the local level.
So when I was studying up about the Forward Party, I was stunned to learn that there are 530,000 elected officials in these United States, and 70% are uncontested. What is that about, and how do you change that?
Well, Marcia, people in New York can recognize this, where 75% of the country, including most of New York, isn't a two-party system. It's a one-party system. There's one party in charge, and by the way, that's the way it plays out around the country. So the reason why so many races are uncontested or uncompetitive is that you know who's going to win. And if you go around to a lot of folks all over the country, they feel like their vote doesn't matter. They're generally right, because if there's something both parties can agree on, it's avoid competition and try and draw a blue or red district that no one else can contest.
But see, what you're saying really is that that's the reason why people don't vote. I mean, if you look at voting in New York State, for example, a small percentage of people vote. You know that. You ran in the mayoral election. Like, how many people voted in that election? Very small number.
Yeah, about 10% of New Yorkers voted in the Democratic primary that decided who the next mayor is going to be. And that's messed up. And when I was running for mayor, I met dozens, maybe even hundreds of New Yorkers who'd come up to me and say, hey, I'm looking forward to supporting you. And I would say, great, are you a registered Democrat? They'd say no. And then I'd say, well, then we're both out of luck, because you need to have registered 4 months before the primary in order to vote. And you have to ask yourself, why is the Democratic Party of New York making it so hard for people to participate? It's because they don't want everyone's voice to be heard.
So here's the question, though. You have a situation where the Forward Party is supporting nonpartisan elections, open nonpartisan elections. The question I have to you is, how do you get people to get to the point where they support that, given the fact that the people who make the decisions are Democrats and Republicans?
That is both the challenge and the opportunity, because the average New Yorker knows it's not working. And they also know that our leaders aren't really responsive and accountable to us, because they've kind of closed themselves off from real competition. There are 3 states that have already voted to get rid of party primaries and say anyone can vote for anyone: Maine, Alaska, and Nevada. Now, New York is a different situation because this is a legislative state. To your point, you have to get the state legislators to sign off on it. That's a higher bar.
Both houses controlled by Democrats.
It's a higher bar. But if we keep making headway in places like, for example, New York City, where there's now an initiative to try and get rid of the party primaries and the mayoral, then we can make progress here and everywhere.
So one of the other things that the Forward Party supports is ranked choice voting, which finally New York actually did in the mayoral race and in citywide elected races all over. You ran in the mayoral primary and you didn't win. How did you feel about the process of running in a ranked choice voting situation?
Ranked choice voting is a dramatic improvement for everyone. The problem here in New York is that you had ranked choice voting within a Democratic primary. So again, if you were an independent or a Republican or a Libertarian or whomever, you're on the outside looking in unless you registered as a Democrat. So ranked choice voting plus nonpartisan primaries is the magic combination. Ranked choice voting itself is an improvement, but you have to include everyone.
So when I was reading the website for the Forward Party, it said that it's not going to have a candidate in the 2024 election, and I was stunned by that. If you really want to have an effect on national politics, why wouldn't you run somebody so that you can have somebody espousing the ideas that you think are so important for the country?
Well, we want to make progress on the 530,000 other races, but we have a presidential electoral system. And I was joking with you before we went on air that if you wanted to help the good guys win, in many cases, you'd want to run a crazy person or lunatic to soak up a few points from whoever you don't want to win. And then if you run someone that people like, then you're probably siphoning votes away from, let's say, the more sane candidate. And so we have a very irrational system. The Biden-Trump rematch that we may actually get, 2/3 of Americans don't want. Combined age 160 in 2024. No offense out there, but come on. I mean, we need to actually have leaders who are not worried about their physical and mental health on a day-to-day basis. But that's not what the two-party system is delivering to us right now.
But so you have a situation where Mitt Romney, at the age of 76, senator from Utah, said, I'm not going to run again because I think that there should be a younger crop of leaders. Should that be a wake-up call for Biden, who's 80, and former President Trump, who's 77?
That's what leadership looks like, Marcia. And Mitt Romney hit the nail on the head when he said, look, we need to let the leaders of the next generation step up and shape the world that they're going to live in. I mean, being in your mid-80s and holding office, it seems more about ego and remaining relevant than actually doing what's right for the people.
So without giving away too much of your book, because I want people to be able to be interested to buy it, one of the things that happens in the book is that the third-party candidate, Cooper Sherman, gets about 1/3 of the vote, which causes the whole system to go into chaos. So the question is, how is a third-party candidate not a spoiler?
Well, it's one reason why in real life the Forward Party is focused on all these local races where the vast majority of them are non-competitive and we create real choice. The way to make it work at the national level would be to imagine a ranked choice voting election at the national level. You could vote for whomever you want and not worry about messing it up or being a Ralph Nader.
So you want ranked choice voting for president and vice president?
Oh, yeah. I mean, if you had that process, then we'd have real choices on the table and you couldn't be bullied into saying, oh, if you vote for this person, you're actually enabling the bad guys.
Would that bring more people to run?
It would, but it would make everyone's votes matter. We're sitting here in New York. We know our votes will not matter in the presidential. There are going to be 4 or 5 states that do matter.
Right.
Does that make sense? And so what you're going to be told is, hey, donate money. Your vote doesn't matter, but send us money. We're going to spend $10 billion beating each other up in 2024, contesting essentially 250,000 swing voters in 4 or 5 swing states.
But aren't you really saying that you want to do away with the Electoral College?
I think that we should have a system where your vote matters, my vote matters. Everyone watching this, like your vote actually matters. And if you had no party primaries and ranked choice voting, then all of our votes would matter. Even if you're not the tippy top winner, you still matter because people would say, okay, how can I become your second choice or acceptable to you?
So if you had ranked choice voting, though, you would still run as a party, like I'm a Democrat, I'm a Republican, et cetera, or no?
Well, I'll tell you, if there was ranked choice voting, someone like me could run and just make a positive case. And then people would be like, oh, I can vote for him. And then if he doesn't win, I can just vote for my second choice. And then you'd have a lot more people running who might be from different parts of American life and not just wedged into politics.
So I guess the question is, this seems like an idea whose time has come, except that how do you convince the party poobahs in Washington and around the country that this is an idea whose time has come?
Well, right now, we're seeing that play out in real life with President Biden, and I think that he should either step aside or allow for a competitive primary on the Democratic side. 2/3 of Democrats say they want someone else. And so will he step up and do the right thing by the American people? There are There are big choices like that right now. And will people actually act in the public's interest instead of their partisan interest? The future of the country depends upon the answer to that.
So we're back talking to Andrew Yang, and I want to talk to you about your book. First of all, I'd like to know the process. Like, how did this all come about? What was your writing process like?
I was trying to convey my experiences running for president in a way that people would find engaging and entertaining. I'm not a novelist, so I found a writing partner who is an experienced novelist, Stephen Marsh. And so he interviewed me and some of my campaign team and then started to write pages based upon characters that emerged and a narrative that I told him, hey, I think this is how things could play out. And it was a joy getting those pages back from him, Marcia, and then saying, yes, yes, no, no, more of this. No, that's not realistic. And then said it to him. We would just iterate over and over again as the book took form.
So how much of Cooper Sherman, who's the third-party candidate of the Maverick Party, how much of that is Andrew Yang?
Well, there's certainly some references and call-outs to the Yang Gang and doing the math.
Do the math.
A few other things.
And you also talked about, basic income and things that were themes of your campaign.
Yeah, you write what you know. And I did live a really incredible journey, making 7 debate stages and getting the support of millions of Americans, which I'm incredibly grateful for.
But also you talk about, well, we have to pose for selfies and you have to be a people person. How much of that was difficult for you to cope with, given the fact that, you weren't part of the political process?
Well,
you were an outsider.
Oh, yeah. One of the things that I'm grateful for, Marcia, is that I was a newcomer. And so it was all so fresh and uplifting because I never expected people to want a selfie with me. And so when someone takes it, you're like, really? Me? And like, okay. And it could be 10 years from now. I might be like, not. But it was also fresh and new for me. And it wasn't my job in the same way it is other.
Did it ever get old after a while, after like the 7th campaign stop of the day?
Well, one of the things that made me kind of a flawed politician is that I'm actually more of an introvert. So when I would go through the 7th event of the day, my team would just see me shut down, be like, just like, let's give him some time to let his mind clear. So I might veg out with watching sports or something like that to recharge. So
you say in the book that the 2024 election will be, and I quote, the American election to see if there will be any more American elections. That's a pretty scary thought. Tell me about it.
Oh, we could be heading towards a 3 or 4 or 5 candidate race in this cycle. And one of the last times something like this happened was the election of 1860. And Abraham Lincoln won that race with 39% of the vote. Most people would be shocked to hear Abraham Lincoln only got 39% of the vote. But there were 4 major candidates. And in that case, the losers of the election said, you know what? Not our president, and seceded. Now, you're not going to have anything that dramatic in 2024, but you could see things happen that have not happened in generations here in the U.S.
So let's look at the political crystal ball. One of the things I was interested in, you tweeted that you thought that Donald Trump can win the 2024 election. This is a man who's been indicted by 4 separate courts. Tell me why you think that's the case.
He could definitely win, Marcia. And if you just look at the polling, he's essentially tied with Joe Biden, who has a 39% approval rating. It's one reason why I think we should have a real primary on the Democratic side. But if you have them tied, and only 4 or 5 states are really going to decide this race, you're looking at a difference of maybe 200,000 to 300,000 swing voters in Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Arizona, Nevada, Georgia. But it's not just the 2 of them. You have Cornel West running in the Green Party. Jill Stein got 1.1% in 2016. I think Cornel West does better than that, especially because 2/3 of Americans are not that excited about either Biden or Trump. So they walk to the ballot box and see, hey, someone else. And West, I've heard of him.
But they also have Robert Kennedy Jr., who's got the name.
Exactly. So if you imagine a ballot, they show up and it's Biden, Trump, West, Kennedy. I think West and Kennedy get 1% to 3% each. And more of that comes from Joe than it does from Trump. So that alone could swing the election to Trump if it's tight. You also have persistent rumors that there might be, let's say, a Joe Manchin type.
And what does Manchin do? Who does he take from?
He takes more from Biden than Trump, according to both numbers and intuition. I mean, I've seen some polling too. So if you have 3, 4, or 5 candidates, then the odds of Trump prevailing, in my mind, are well above 50%.
And does that happen in the Electoral College as well, or just the popular vote, or both?
Well, here's where it gets dicey, is that if you have an election where no one gets to 270 electoral votes because, let's say, an independent actually gets a state or two, then it gets thrown to the U.S. Congress, who then choose with each state getting one vote, not each member or each senator. Each state gets one vote.
Republican wins.
Yeah, and that's something that I was with a journalist who, like you, is deep into politics and said, I actually did not know there was a contingent election clause in the Constitution if no one gets to 270, because none of us has seen that in our lifetimes.
So here's the question. What role will the number 2 person, the vice presidential running mate, play in how people vote? I mean, if you take a look at the Democratic ticket, there's not a lot of enthusiasm for Kamala Harris among Democrats if something were to happen to Joe Biden. If Trump were to pick somebody that people think could be the president if something were to happen to him, like he had to go to jail or whatever. So could that mean that independents and others would vote for him thinking that the number 2 person would be better than the number 2 person on the Democratic ticket?
I think the number 2 becomes much more important when you're looking at candidates who would be in their 80s within their term. And
Joe Biden's already 80.
Oh, exactly. I mean, he'll be 82 in 2024. So if you don't have a presidential primary, which again, I think they should have on the Democratic side, I think they should have a vice presidential primary and say, look, at this point, we're choosing the next president. I mean, let's call it as it is. And to your point, there are not that many people confident in a Kamala Harris presidency.
So here's the question. Would you urge Joe Biden to take a look at the political landscape and his own physical well-being or whatever and say, for the good of the country, I'm not going to run again, as Lyndon Johnson did so many years ago?
I'm going to use a different example. I think Joe Biden should follow George Washington's lead and say, look, I've done my part and I'm now going to step aside and let the next generation decide for itself who should be in charge. So there are 3 things that he can do. Number 1, hey, I'm going to step aside. I think that's the right thing to do. Number 2 is, let's have a competitive primary. I will run in it and let the people decide. Number 3 is, I'm going to run again, but we're going to have a competitive primary to decide who my VP is going to be because we think that person may take over. And then, of course, there's number 4 is status quo. Joe Biden remains on the ticket, which in my opinion does lead us to the very, very real possibility of Trump winning again in 24.
Okay, we're going to have to leave it right there.